My lords and lairds, welcome back to the Administrative Results channel. Today I'm taking you on a trip down memory lane, a road to nostalgia, and that would be the road to the mainstream gun shows that you watched as a kid. If you're around my age, you may have been early teens, maybe even young adult if you're one of the older guys, but I remember a number of firearms-related shows being on networks such as Discovery Channel, Military Channel, the History Channel, and those shows consumed my little young admin brain, and they would turn me into the young man I am today. You may be wondering, hey admin, why are you covering this? Well, it's my channel. I can do whatever I want. There are some firearms videos coming down the pipe right now. We are going over the Scar H right now, and there's some other guns that we're working on. But I wanted to make this because it was living rent-free in my head, and typically the best way to get this stuff out of my brain is to make a video on it, so this is the best way. The shows we're going over today, you should all recognize, I think. Some of them may be like a blast from the past because I kind of forgot about some of them. Now, what's not going to be going over today is Deadliest Warrior. You may be wondering, hey, why? Why not Deadliest Warrior? The first reason is there's a lot to cover with Deadliest Warrior. The second reason is I need to break this up so I can make sweet, sweet internet points and more YouTube money. Also, if I sound a little bit under the weather, it's because I'm a little bit sicky-wicky. I got a little bit of a cold, and I'm fighting it. So send me your thoughts and prayers. One like and comment equals one thought and prayer. No, I'm just kidding. Now, I would consider these shows to be like legacy media. Maybe it's not like the right terminology for legacy media, but I consider them to be like the house, you know, like mainstream, where they have like producers and editors and budgets, and like it's not YouTube, right? Like YouTube, I can take me and my cameraman, we go out to the desert, I rip off some rounds, and I can make a YouTube video. And there's no producer telling me what I can or can't do. These guys are working with a studio network, and they have a lot of rules to meet with the advertiser demands of TV. A little bit of chicken fried. Now, one of the first shows that comes to mind would be the show Top 10 from the Military Channel. This show, I believe, debuted in 2005, and they would typically go over the top 10 military arms. You have fighter jets or planes or tanks or small arms. Typically, small arms is stuff that I cover more on the channel. I've yet to cover a tank. I'll get there. I want to cover a tank. Now, Top 10 actually is not a bad show, looking back at it. For the time being in 2005, I thought it was pretty sick. It was pretty banging, as the kids might say. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very formative. I would have been like 9 watching this show, and I was locked in. Other 9-year-olds were watching SpongeBob. I was locked in watching the top 10 weapons of the military-industrial complex on the Military Channel. We are not the same. It also helped that I grew up watching Lord of the Rings, so that was the decisive split in the West. While the other kids were watching Harry Potter, they'd go off to watch other media that was lame, that was fake and gay. I would go off to watch Military Channel. Okay, now the Military Channel, you can kind of see with some of their other shows, because I was looking at the list that they had from that time, and they would use a lot of the same like talking head guys. The internet wasn't what it is now.
What the f*** is this piece of shit?
Like how there's so many different niches, and there's so many people that have a platform on the internet where they can dive into the niches. I know guys that like run tank museums, and they can talk about it for hours. That didn't exist just yet. YouTube wasn't like the thing to do that on. So for a TV crew to show up to this museum and be like, hey, do you wanna tell us about guns? Those dudes were jazzed. Now in Top 10, you can kind of see that a little bit with some of the guys they have on. It's kind of like the disconnect from like where Gun2 would end up. Nothing against them, but they kind of, a lot of them look like nerds. Some of the older guys may have been meat studs back in their day, but some of the younger guys they have on talking just look like museum curator nerds, because they're like talking about like, yeah, the STG-44 was just a very innovative design for its time. It's like, would you ever shoot an STG-44? Shut up. I don't know why I'm so mad about it. My notes are very in-depth and knowledgeable. JK, I failed Algebra 2 in high school. LMAO. Now, what happened after Top 10? I'm sure they saw those ratings of all the 9-year-old admins watching the show and thought, damn, we have some lightning in a bottle. Let's keep this show going. So then they had Future Weapons, 2006 to 2008. From what I was reading, that said they were airing Future Weapons on both Discovery and the Military Channel. I could have that wrong to some capacity, but that's what I'm going off of. Future Weapons, hosted by a Navy SEAL, Richard Makowitz. Now, Richard has sadly passed away on January 2nd of 2017 at the age of 51 from brain cancer, which to me is a big bummer, kind of a downside. I think we lost a hero of forming youth into radical gun owners. I will say with Future Weapons, another one of those shows that was like building upon the concept of like showing off these cool guns in a controlled manner. I think looking back at it now, with what I know, looking at Richard Makowitz shoot, I will say he does not look like a Navy SEAL shooting compared to the Navy SEALs we have today. So to be fair, Makowitz, I don't think he had the prowess of getting to be a SEAL during the global war on terror, where they got to refine a lot of stuff. Those guys that fought in the early days of the GWAT, from what I was researching, discovered a lot about how to fight, and things changed a lot because they learned lessons in blood. Now, Makowitz, he may have missed that train, but he did what SEALs ultimately do, and that is become a media personality, and he crushed it in that sense. I thought he was pretty cool. I will say, looking back at it now, with what I know now, watching him shoot and talk about certain things, I'm like, what do you mean by that? What are you talking about? So looking back at his Tavor 21 episode on YouTube, and he was talking about how like the Tavor is just as accurate as a sniper rifle. And it's like never the case that a military assault rifle, yes, that's a real term, would be as accurate as a dedicated sniper system. That's just not a thing. There's a reason those things are a sniper system and one's an assault rifle.
It's a smaller automatic rifle that matches the firepower of the M16, but it's as accurate as a sniper rifle.
Sounds good to me!
He also would say it's like the Tavor is easier to handle than an M16, and then watching him shoot, he just has like the goofiest shooting looking platform. This stuff existed before Chris Costa and Travis Haley did Magpul Dynamics. I also can't stress how much Magpul Dynamics rocked the tactical world. All right, when you look back at that stuff, I think it'd be a whole nother divergence into topics. I have to stay on track though. We have to keep moving forward. So Future Weapons would have a 3-season run with a list of 29 episodes, and I'll give it to him. I enjoyed that show from what I can remember. I'm sure there were still some very goofy things going on, but I had a good time watching it. You're in a coma, wake up. You're in a coma, wake up. You're in a coma, wake up. Now, another show that was on the radar would be Lock and Load with R Lee Ermey from 2008 to 2009. If you're unfamiliar with R Lee Ermey, he was on the set of Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. I think he was some sort of advisor for like Marine Corps training during their boot camp. And apparently he was just doing so good that Stanley Kubrick was like, why don't you just play the drill instructor? And that would be the catalyst that launches R Lee Ermey's career into stardom. Now, in Lock and Load with R Lee Ermey, he kind of plays the same character that he would play, you know, that drill instructor, that gunnery sergeant. I'm Gunnery Sergeant R Lee Ermey. And it's like everyone loves that drill instructor vibe because they're so creative at hazing you.
Were you born a bad, slimy scumbag, you piece of private file? Or did you have to work on it?
It's a class act talent because you can insult someone, but to creatively insult them while in the process of making them better, a whole nother skill. So I will say Lock and Load with R Lee Ermey has a little bit of the twang of the boomer juice. There's a little bit of a hint of that. And it's understandable given his age demographic. You know, it's kind of like fun and familiar. It's like your grandpa has his own show, your grandpa that was in the Marine Corps. It's like fun, it's familiar, especially growing up watching that. You just have no, like when you're young like that, you have no other concept of any of this. I'm not cursed with the knowledge that I have now to like look back at this and be like, that may have been off the mark, or that may have been a little bit cringe. To be fair, it's like a lot of my videos are probably pretty cringe too, so it's like, who am I to criticize? I'm really sitting here talking about other shows on a show, trying to make a show about shows.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing. There you go.
Those examples of the TV shows would go on to be like pretty harmless. At worst, they get some things wrong, like at worst, right? They don't always nail the mark and don't always have the best factual kind of thing, but typically with like guys like R Lee Ermey or maybe Richard Mack, they can kind of build a show around them, but they're kind of like just like the insert credibility character to kind of carry the story and be the talking piece that you kind of relate to and be like, oh, that guy was a Navy SEAL, or I know R Lee Ermey, he was a guy from Full Metal Jacket, right? It's kind of like that brings in a little bit of an audience and credibility. Like they are that sit-in. So there's a formula to it is what I'm trying to say. Gentlemen, are you enjoying this episode? Of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? This episode is made possible to fantastic sponsors. Sponsors such as Americana Pipe Dream Apparel, fantastic young Zoomers getting after it in the milsurp space and arena. They have plenty of awesome stuff to help fill out your nerdy LARPing fantasies. Of course, the biggest thing that they can give to you is milsurp clothing, but they have a bunch of other cool stuff as well. Cool stuff such as night vision knives, manuals, MREs, rations, a bunch of cool products on the website to take your milsurp collection to the next level. I'm a big fan of those guys, and they've supported the channel for quite some time now, so of course you gotta go check out Americana Pipe Dream Apparel. You're in a coma, wake up. Your family loves you. Get out of it. Get out of there right now, hurry. Now, the other two shows I really wanted to cover are kind of dumpster fire of a show, and they have a lot of sadness to them. and a lot of really heavy topics, which are not kind of fun. They're not fun topics. One's not as bad as the other. The other one's like, if one was like a dumpster fire, it'd be like The Office, you know, trash can. Maybe someone threw a cigarette in there and it's like starting to catch on fire.
The fire's shooting at us!
The other one is like a full-on Chernobyl waste meltdown of a dumpster fire. We'll save that one for last. Now, the one that's not as bad would be American Guns. If you're not familiar with American Guns, you probably forgot it. It's probably for the better. It's not like that great. Now, American Guns was a 2-season show, 2011 to 2012, and ended up being canceled. It featured the Wyatt family, with a patriarch Rich, his wife Renee, and their 2 kids, Kurt and Paige. I do remember this show, and for one reason. I probably would have been 15 to 16 when this show was coming out. That was like my prime demographic of girls that I was into that were not into me. I was not always a meat stud that you see before you. Now I have to clarify, I was 16 and I thought Paige was pretty cute. I hope she was like of age at the time, or like, this sounds really weird. Teenage me was pretty stoked. I was pretty invested. You have firearms, you have females that are attractive. What better juice is that, baby? And I believe what Rich said, he was a prior police officer that did 20 years on the force. And then he went on to go and work and own the shop Gunsmoke. Now, a lot of things would come out that kind of damned him, and it would end up being his demise. It's probably the show. The show, I can't remember anything in particular. It apparently got pretty good ratings. I think they were pulling down like 1 million viewers. I don't always pull down 1 million views. I've tasted the sweet face of God when I have pulled down 1 million views. It's exhilarating. It's a good feeling when you see that M number next to your view count. So I can kind of see like the hype around it. So the show would end up getting canceled. I think it had to do some bad timing going on in the country. There was 2 major shootings in 2012, one being Aurora and the other being Sandy Hook. And the media perspective at that time was not very friendly to firearms at all. And it kind of never got better. Mainstream media has only ever gotten worse when it comes to the perspective of firearms culture and the Second Amendment. And 2012 was pretty bad. I mean, I was still in high school, so I didn't really have too much dog in the fight. Like, I couldn't even have legally owned firearms yet. But looking back at it, it was a very big topic of discussion was more gun control. And I can only assume the execs and maybe the shareholders at Discovery were not really chomping at the bit to face more controversy by showing off guns in a positive light. They were like, you know what, this juice is probably not worth the squeeze to them. So at that point, they were probably starting to back out and be like, we're not going to renew this. Now, the cancellation of Gunsmoke was probably Rich Wyatt's least concern because he would end up getting visited by the IRS and the ATF. Fellas, I can't stress how bad of a combo that is. That's like world-ending powers coming together to ruin your life. I believe what he was doing is that he would have his employees file in firearms purchases at Gunsmoke as miscellaneous, and they wouldn't do the transfer there. He would then send them to a neighboring gun store where the customer would fill out the transfer paperwork and do all the legality for obtaining the firearm. And then on top of that, he wasn't filing his tax returns. You can't be a criminal mastermind and not file your tax returns. That's how they took down Capone, dude. You gotta pay your taxes. The man wants his pound of flesh.
I'm crazy enough to take on Batman, but the IRS, no, thank you.
So in some ways, Rich is kind of like a folk hero, right? Tax evasion, evading gun laws. It's kind of cool. So outside of that, I mean, Gunsmoke, I can't remember too much from the show. They probably did like some of the goofy theatrics of going out and shooting silly willy guns. Outside of that, right, my critiques of the show, nothing too crazy. I mean, the family kind of had a goofiness to them. Looking at Rich and his wife Paige, they kind of look like the couple that would be like at a resort bar and they start being too friendly to you and your wife, buying you drinks and stuff, and Rich would probably have like a pineapple shirt on. Kind of gives me that vibe. A little bit too friendly, you know what I mean? Their son Wyatt, when he was on the show, he kind of had the look like he would sell you pot to to teenagers. Like, he had that vibe. And then Paige was just like, had that stereotypically attractive young girl vibe. It's not all like end of the world bad, but it's kind of like the feeling that I get now looking back at it. None of this stuff is as terrible as our final show we're gonna go over, and that would be Sons of Guns. Things were dramatic on American Guns. Everything was life or death on Sons of Guns. It was a very drama-filled show. There was always people arguing. Their projects were ridiculous. There was an episode where they took a sick Thompson. I can't remember if it was like a 1927 model or a 1928 A1 model. I'm totally blanking. But essentially they're like, we're gonna tacticalize the Thompson. We're gonna make it modern, make it modular. So they just put like some Picatinny rails on it, and they're like, they ain't never been done before. I can do that. I can do the accent. I'm allowed to. So the shop is Red Jacket Firearms. Is based out of, I think it's Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where all the Creole folk are. Ain't never been done before. That was a common saying on the show. show. Like, they were just breaking down barriers and doing stuff that ain't never been done before. To their credit, it was a pretty entertaining show at the time. Now, that show would be going from 2011 to 2014. Now, at this period, same kind of with American Guns, 2011 to 2014 or 2011 to 2012, we're starting to see the introduction of YouTube having firearms on it. We're getting the OGs on. We're getting guys like Hickok 45, FPS Russia. We're getting Carnicon. We're getting a lot of the OGs. I think Ian McCollum was even created his channel in 2011. So a lot of the OGs that we know on the gun YouTube space are starting to pop up and making gun firearms content. The golden era of gun YouTube, I would say, would probably be like maybe 2011 to 2015, and then things would just go downhill from there. What do you mean by that? We're starting to see like a meshing of the worlds, right? Now, with Sons of Guns, the show itself was way more dramatic, and there was definitely a lot of cringy moments. I was watching one video, and they took out that Thompson to their local, I would assume it was their sheriff's office. They had like a sheriff guy out there, and they had what looks like some SWAT guys where they're demoing this tactical Thompson. I can't stress how much I hate the idea of trying to make a Thompson like modern and tactical. The wild notion of trying to like market it to a local PD as like a duty gun. Like, this is what they're trying to do in this like episode. The sheriff at one point is like, I could see this being a really good asset for our department. And it's like, what are you talking about, dude? If anything, you guys should be running like sub guns, like MP5s or SBRs. Like, it's just such a wild what department is gonna be running a tactical Thompson? Now, I kind of like it for one-off unique points, but for the practicality, there's a reason these other guns are so prolific now within law enforcement. In what world do you think a tactical Thompson is gonna be used in a law enforcement capacity? Now, typically the show would be packed full of drama. The shop owner, Will Hayden, the boomer boss man, he's definitely got that boomer vibe of being the big hoss boss in charge and always butting heads with his employees that were trying to like be the voice of reason. One such employee would be like Joe Mew. For a lot of things, he's like, hey, maybe we should cancel this project, boss. This is like kind of like putting a lot of strain on what we're doing here for logistics and stuff like that. And then Will be like, well, he just don't get it. We got to keep these projects going. If we lose that, and it's like this crazy like thought process. Will Hayden had a daughter named Stephanie, and then there was also Chris. Those were kind of like the big four that were always on the show. There was a few other guys kind of like in the background for drama's sake when they needed it, but to me, those were like the big four cast. Content warning. The show would end up being canceled, and this is where the dumpster fire levels goes to the max, because Will Hayden would end up being a massive piece of So the show would end up getting canceled as a direct result of Hayden's arrest and various charges. So yet again, I want to give a content warning, and I want to try and handle this. And I know typically we have a lighthearted perspective on the channel. I'm kind of like a jaded person to some degree, but this is a serious kind of topic. Assault and these kind of things I don't want to take lightly, especially due to the nefarious nature of Hayden's actions. I'm trying to handle this with like some delicate gloves, right? Now, another factor I want to talk about is that a lot of these people are probably trying to move on with their life after this. Like, imagine knowing someone like this that you were working with and being close with in life, and they did all this, and then like it imploded a lot of your life. In some cases, it directly affected and scarred your childhood. So I'm trying to handle this with a little bit of delicate nature to it. So Will Hayden would end up his daughter, and then it would come out later that he ended up his daughter Stephanie when she was a child. And so he had these charges brought against him, and the show was canceled. And this would probably put the kibosh on a lot of mainstream gun content that you saw on TV shows, where not only is the zeitgeist really bad for firearms ownership due to active shooters at this time point, but it's also really bad with nefarious actions of the individuals that are starring on these shows. So the mainstreams are probably looking at this like, not only is it we're getting pressure publicly from Guns Bad Media, but we're also like having these guys that are stars on the show being very nefarious, evil people. Now, things kind of get worse too. So Stephanie Ford was married to Chris Ford. They would also end up getting arrested for child or assault. And their crime was they used a belt on, I think, one of their kids too hard to the point where he bruised. Now, thankfully, it's nothing like in my mind. Assault is way worse. Like a kid getting beat up, like they can kind of like handle that trauma down the road. Like I got the belt, I got spanked a lot growing up. I turned out okay, kind of, I guess. Taking it too far though with that punishment, definitely not a good thing. You got to look after and protect children. They would go on to get arrested, and then I would assume at some point they also split. Stephanie ended up going on to Dr. Phil to talk about her experiences. Now, Stephanie is still around. I found her on TikTok and Instagram. Stephanie, for the most part, seemed like she moved on, probably doing a lot better, and I would wish her the best. It's kind of a big bummer. Chris is still around. I found him on YouTube and Instagram. He also got arrested for domestic violence. Now, Chris actually has his own gun store from what I was seeing on the interwebs. So if he's not a prohibited possessor, I don't know what sort of legality workings or sentencing went on into that background. It seemed like there's no felony charges on Chris if he's still doing firearm stuff. I checked in on his YouTube channel, and he was at like 2023 SHOT Show doing some interviews. And then Joe is also still around. He's doing his thing on Instagram from what I saw. He's running his own company. Joe seems like he made it out the cleanest of the big four that I was talking about, so more props to him. It's kind of like a darker turn on this episode, right? As fun and lighthearted as it was, but it's still like a moment of time in history, especially given to the firearm zeitgeist that we find ourselves in, that I find myself in. And there's a lot of takeaways in my mind. I thought this was let me pee real quick. Now, these shows all have some very interesting takeaways in my perspective, especially leading into the modern world where the internet presence is so sought after. A lot of these people that were getting notoriety off these shows, they have failed to really get a large platform on the internet after the shows would eventually come to an end. In some cases, they just end up in prison, like Rich and Will Hayden. So there's kind of like an interesting case study there, is like, will mainstream media notoriety at this point in time, would it have led to online success and notoriety after the fact? Now, there's another human side of this, besides like the business aspect of brand building and scaling up your own business, whatever it may be. And that's the human element. And that would be amplifiers of character being fame and financial success. So with these people getting pretty much overnight fame, being forced into the zeitgeist on these shows, getting a lot of money probably from the show as well. It's an amplification of character. What kind of character did they have at that time? Now they're amplifying on that. I think at times in life, most people have this grandiose idea that they want to have some level of fame and notoriety. They want to have more financial success, and there's nothing wrong with that, but those things all come in good time. Typically, it's a bad idea to get that stuff overnight because you're just not ready for it. It can be too much like good thing at once. And in some cases, that's what happened here with a lot of these people on the show. The earlier show's not as bad. Like if you think of guys like Lock and Load with R Lee Ermey, he's already tasted that and experienced it, and he's just doing his thing on his show, and he's kind of already been through the media circus. Or, Top 10, those guys aren't really like famous. They're just kind of like museum curators. Or Future Weapons, it's kind of like they're not like a big deal for them. But with guys like Sons of Guns or American Guns, that notoriety may have potentially puts a lot of stressors on the relationships, and then put a lot of stress on the personal life. And then now you're dealing with finances. And when you get a lot of money, people start coming out of the woodwork being like, hey, I see you have a lot of money now. Do you want to help out your estranged uncle? If you look at like lottery winners, a lot of the times it goes really bad for them. So it's like too much of a good thing at once can be a bad thing. I, of course, thought this was an interesting topic, but that's just me. You may let me know in the comment section down below that, hey, maybe it wasn't. But of course, we have to go over Deadliest Horror in a future episode. So if you're not subscribed, make sure that you give me a subscribe. If you want to leave me a comment in the comment section down below while you are on the toilet watching this, I will be on the toilet replying to your comments. It's like we're going to be connected. Gentlemen, I have nothing else for you. I will catch you on the flip. I have something else. Patreon is an excellent way to support the channel. Early access to videos. We do Q&As in there, and you generally help support what's going on here at Administrative Results. There have been some policy updates that are going to start hampering certain gun content, and everything does help in this sort of genre. As well as merchandise. Rocking some sick Administrative Results. I hate that I said that. Show your mom you're on track to finding a girlfriend and making her your wife to make a whole bunch of beautiful bambinos. Okay, now I truly have nothing else for you. You're in a coma, wake up. You're in a coma, wake up. You're in a coma, wake up.